Tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern over on Jaguar Gator 8, a new college football video drops. In this video, we'll talk about a bizarre broadcasting controversy from the 1990s involving Clemson and South Carolina. And now, on with our featured presentation. Today, I think it's safe to say that Buffalo Bills tickets are some of the hottest tickets in town. They have a great fan base, they have a great team, and considering how bad the Sabres are, seeing as they haven't made the playoffs since 2011 and haven't won a playoff series since 2007, for all intents and purposes, they are the only team in town. Every game is now sold out. Season tickets are sold out. And especially with a new stadium on the horizon and a great team that's fun to root for and that wins a lot, Buffalo's fan base is going to make sure that it stays that way for a long, long time. However, it wasn't always like that. Remember the Staples commercials with the "That Was Easy" button? Yeah, it was easier to get tickets to Bills games in the 1970s than it was to press that button. We're talking about a team that never sold out, and routinely drew crowds in the 20,000 and 30,000 fan range. We're talking about a fan base that did not show up to the games because of how bad the team was and how incompetent they were on so many levels. And a fan base that, considering the fact that games got blacked out back then if they couldn't sell out, would have rather watched no football or watched another team out of market than watch the Bills. But of all the moments in Bills history when it came to trying to drum up fan support during the dark days of the late 70s, perhaps none are as funnier and as crazier as this game right here. Because for a 1979 game against the Chicago Bears, the Bills badly miscalculated the number of fans that would show up and buy tickets. And when I say that they badly miscalculated, I don't mean that they were off by a couple dozen or even a couple hundred people. They were off by a whole lot more than that, as their grand plan backfired in spectacular fashion. This is the story behind what might just be, considering the circumstances and considering how it played out, the dumbest business miscalculation in the over 60-year history of the Buffalo Bills franchise. Before I talk about the actual move in question and why they were so off with their ticket sales, we need some context to understand the game in question and what exactly they were selling tickets for. It's October 7th, 1979. It's week 6 of the NFL season, and we have a very big interconference game on our hands over at Rich Stadium down in Orchard Park between the Buffalo Bills and the Chicago Bears. To be honest, even though it's only week 6, just the fact that this game seemed to mean something for Buffalo was shocking, as the Bills had traditionally been a team that had been out of it from the onset. This will become important later on when breaking down their attendance. It seemed like throughout the latter part of the 1970s, they were the runt of the litter, not just in the ultra-competitive AFC East, but in the entire AFC as well. This was a team that was 5-11 the year before, going 3-9 through their first 12, and never once being at or above 500. A team that was 3-11 in 1977 and started 0-4, just about killing any support they had by the start of October. And a team that was 2-12 the year before that in 1976. Over the previous 3 seasons, the Bills had not spent a single day above 500. And that's why this game against the Bears was so shockingly important, because this felt like the biggest game for the Bills in quite some time. Through the first 5 weeks of the season, they actually sat at 3-2. For the first time since 1975, they were actually above 500 at some point. And it's not just that they were above 500 and playing well, but they were looking really good while doing so. You had an offense that was firing on all cylinders, having scored 154 points thus far for an average of just under 31 points per game, which was the top total in the entire NFL. In their last 2 home games before this, they won both of them, scoring 46 against the Jets and scoring 51 against the Bengals, in a game best known for rolling hooks coming out of nowhere and scoring 4 rushing touchdowns in the second half. Buffalo had scored 137 points over their last 14 quarters of football entering this one against the Bears, meaning that they were averaging just a hair under 10 points per quarter over the last month or so. That is absurd. If you win this game against the Bears, and improve to 4-2, then not only do you have a chance to be tied for first place in the AFC East by the end of the week, but your playoff hopes go up tremendously. This was, quite literally, the biggest game that Buffalo had in nearly half a decade. Which raises the ultimate question. How many people would show up? Sure, attendance had been really lean lately, but that was with a losing team that was out of it by the end of the third or the fourth week of the season. Now, you've got a winner on your hands playing in an absolutely monumental game. The last time Buffalo had sold out a game was all the way back on October 26, 1975, when they lost 35-30 to the Miami Dolphins in an offensive shootout. Oddly enough, I talked about that game in a previous video of mine, as it pertained to a dumb broadcasting controversy. So if you want to learn more about that, click the card in the upper right corner. Since that game, the Bills had played 28 home games. All 28 of them were not sold out. All 28 of them were blacked out locally, since NFL rules at the time stated that if the game was not sold out, it could not be shown locally in the area. Some games were awfully close, but didn't quite reach the mark. The Week 1 game against the Dolphins in 1979, for instance, drew 77,683 fans, which isn't a sellout, seeing as Rich Stadium held 80,020 seats, but it was respectable nonetheless. Other games, like a 1977 game against Washington that drew 22,975 fans, and a game that same year against Atlanta that drew 27,348 fans, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, not so much. But Bills officials were feeling incredibly optimistic about this one, and that potentially this could be the one to break the non-sellout streak. The bad news was that it was highly unlikely that the game was going to be sold out in time to lift the blackout. Per NFL rules, not only did you have to sell out your stadium for the game to be shown on TV, but you had to sell it out at least 72 hours before game time, though some exceptions can be made to extend the deadline another 24 hours if necessary. And no Buffalo official was surprised by that. It was going to be too much to ask if they wanted to fill all 80,000 seats 3 days before this game. But the good news was that they expected this number to be incredibly high, one of the highest in years. As one spokesman said on how ticket sales were doing for this game, "We're doing better right now than we did before our last home game against the Jets, and we drew nearly 70,000 for that one." For those curious, the exact number for that game was 68,731, of which 14,900 tickets were sold on the actual day of the game. In other words, if the Bills already had over 70,000 tickets sold, and they could depend on some strong game day sales if history was anything to go off of, then this sellout was absolutely possible. And with that, even though the Bills were unable to get the blackout lifted, their expectations for attendance for this game remained sky high. And that's when Buffalo announced their grand plan. They were going to drop the final 5,000 tickets on sale at 9 a.m. on game day. If the Bills could sell 5,000 tickets on the day of the game, then it would be the first sellout in 4 years. And Buffalo was going all in to make sure that this process ran as smoothly as possible. Because let's make something very clear. It is way better to over-prepare than it is to under-prepare. The last thing you want to do is to not be ready for the onslaught of ticket sales, leading to long lines, leading to potential altercations, and leading to people missing the game due to waiting in line too long. It's like how if you're in an airport and going through TSA, you're not upset when there's 10 machines open to put your bags on and there's no one at the airport, but you're livid when there's one machine open and there's a giant line. In other words, this was not like what happened nearly 2 decades later with the whole New England Patriots ticketing fiasco at the 1996 AFC Championship, where they were woefully underprepared, and it cost them badly. You can learn more about that disaster by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Having said that, the Bills really went above and beyond to make sure that this process would be as smooth as possible, and that everyone who wanted an available ticket could not only get one, but get one quickly and hassle-free. As ticket manager Jim Cipriano said, We haven't had anything like this since 1975. We've had to open another ticket booth on a road by the stadium, and we hired 3 extra girls from one of those help agencies to handle the demand. In other words, the Bills hired a handful of employees and opened up a location that hadn't been used in years, and probably needed to be, at the very least, refurbished or tweaked somewhat in order to prepare for this game against the Bears, and prepare for the game day sales to start rolling in. Just as this was a big moment for the Bills on the field, off the field, it was a big moment for the Bills officials running the tickets. Now the bad news, as you could probably tell from these highlights the whole time, was that this game was absolutely terrible. Not just for the Bills, but for any football fan in general that had working eyes. Because when all was said and done, the Bills lost this game and dropped to 500, losing by a final score of 7-0. Yep, you heard that right. 7-0. So much for that high-powered, high-flying offense that had been crushing it for Buffalo lately, right? Buffalo finished the game with 7 first downs. They picked up a mere 64 yards rushing on 24 carries, meaning that they averaged about 2.6 yards per carry. The man who got the most touches, Curtis Brown, had 9 carries for 7 yards, averaging under a yard per carry, and one of those carries went for 8 yards, meaning that if you take out his longest run of the day, he actually had negative yardage. Buffalo only had 42 net passing yards, as quarterback Joe Ferguson, 2 years removed from leading the NFL in passing yardage, had a stinker under center, going 5 for 21, completing 23.8% of his passes, with no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a passer rating of 19.7, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball to the ground on every single play. Ferguson had 1 completed pass in the first half, and it was on a screen. He was that bad. The only action on the scoreboard came on a 1-yard touchdown run by Walter Payton in the 4th quarter. That was it. Other than that, unless you like a game with 17 punts, and where the Bills punted more times than they got first downs, you would have been better off just taking a nap and catching up on sleep than watching the snooze fest. But that's not why you're here. Because the important part in this story of ours is to see how many tickets the Bills sold. Remember, they had 5,000 tickets remaining to be sold on game day. They opened up another ticket booth in preparation for the onslaught and the game day hype. They had hired 3 new employees whose sole purpose was to help out the already existing ticket office members for this game. And as crazy as it sounds, we actually have footage of the Bills ticket office on this day. Roll the tape.
I'm ready! I'm ready! I'm ready!
That's right. They did not sell 5,000 tickets like they thought they would when they opened everything up. They didn't sell 4,000. Nor did they sell 3,000. Nor did they sell 2,000. Nor did they sell 1,000. Nor did they even sell 500. For all intents and purposes, they sold no tickets. Because let's break down the math here. Richard Stadium holds 80,020 seats. There were 73,383 fans that attended this game, plus another 1,836 fans who bought tickets but didn't show up for one reason or another. This means that, in total, there were 75,219 fans who bought tickets to this game. Buffalo released the final 5,000 tickets on game day. Subtract that number from the capacity of the stadium, 80,020, and you get 75,020, which is what the tickets sold number was before game day. The final attendance was 75,219, so we need to subtract the pre-Sunday number from the final number. And when you do that, you get a grand total of 199 tickets sold for that game against the Bears on game day. They planned for 5,000. They ended up getting 199. They got less than 4% of what they planned for. For some perspective, imagine if you're an artist that books a show at Madison Square Garden and 827 people show up. Imagine if you're a high school teacher in a classroom with 25 desks in it So it's pretty standard. And one student shows up to class that day. One singular student. That's what this was like. That's how bad this blunder was for the Bills. Granted, the weather was on and off throughout the second half, so that could have played a part, but still, that is an embarrassingly bad miscalculation. Now, did this blunder hurt the Bills financially or in the long run? I'm fairly confident that it did not, and that hiring 3 employees temporarily and polishing up a ticket office that you would eventually need in future seasons, like 1980, when the Bills won the AFC East straight out of nowhere, was not the end of the world. And again, it's better than the alternative of if they didn't plan for this. 5,000 people showed up buying all the tickets, and you were severely understaffed. It's like how it's embarrassing to be 6 hours early to the airport for your flight, but it's even more embarrassing and detrimental to miss your flight entirely. But is it still embarrassing and hilarious nonetheless? Oh, you bet! You bet it is. Someone grossly miscalculated this game to be off on your projections by that much. Because on this day in 1979, the only thing worse than Buffalo's offense was the Buffalo ticket officials' predictions. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.